Recording is on.
Awesome. Yes, so now more officially, welcome everyone again. Thank you so much for joining us today for the very first office hours call of the EPF7. Yay! We got the next cohort starting, and we get our special first guest for the office hours call. So we are starting a series of AMAs with core devs from people from the core ecosystem, and our first invitation got accepted by Shane from Lighthouse. However, Shane is also a fellow from the very last cohort, so we wanted to bring him because he's the person with probably the freshest experience of what you are just about to go through. So hopefully share some of that as well. But yeah, so thanks so much for being here, especially you, Shane, but all of you, of course. But Shane, let's get started. Tell us about yourself. Like, I'm curious, maybe just to get some of your background, to get people idea, like maybe what you did before the cohort. Like, how did you even get to the fellowship? What did you do before, and what brought you there?
Yeah, great question. Been doing open source for maybe probably like 6 or so years now. First was with in the Cosmos ecosystem. I was working for a DeFi focused L1 called Injective. So like 3 years there, doing let's say a lot of bridging type work. And then at some point I figured better to move into Ethereum because like bigger validator set, more decentralized. In Cosmos, it's like maybe 50 validators. So if I really, at some point wanted to kind of feel like we're able to really democratize access to finance globally, then you should not only be reliant on like, let's say, a few validators to secure your chain. That's just like how I felt about it. So I wanted to move over to Ethereum, found the EPF program through one of my buddies, started doing the study group. And actually, the interesting part is I was doing the execution layer the whole time. I made like at least 10 PRs to Reth. I was working on the EPF like wiki, like at least 10 PRs there, all about execution layer stuff. So I was like really all gung ho about that. I even like started talking to like the Reth guys about a project to do. It was called delayed execution. So I found a project or like that. And then I get all the way to Con to do UCC. And then while there, I present like, hey, so I'm going to build on Reth. And then they kind of mentioned like, oh, there's a part of delay execution that would be good to build on the consensus layer, like as a proof of concept. So I got in touch with one of the Lighthouse guys. And while I'm there, one of the Lighthouse guys is like, oh, your project, late execution, is going to pretty much be killed by this thing called EPBS. It gives you the same like scaling benefits. And if you want, you can come like help us work on that. So I was like, oh man, do I like keep on like doing Reth and working on this project that may or may not work out? Or do I switch over to consensus layer and do EPBS stuff? And the more I thought about it is like, I don't know, when like chance like comes your way, like take advantage of it. If like a core dev from Lighthouse says like, come help us with this like potentially like big project that touches like the entire consensus layer, then I felt like the answer should be yes to that. So anyway, I started diving into consensus layer, and I'm like pretty late-ish in the cohort at this point. It's like we're like a month in at that point. I already wrote my EPF like project proposal. Like I'm doing ref stuff hardcore, right? But anyway, then like I start slowly doing more consensus layer stuff, and then like EPBS did get picked as the headliner for the Glamsterdam like network upgrade that's coming up pretty soon, hard fork, and luckily that happened. So I made the right move, but there was definitely some chance involved there, right? Like, oh, what if it didn't get picked as like the hard fork? Then like I could still have done EPBS stuff. But yeah, these are things where it's like there's a lot of nuance and like navigating that you don't really know like where things are going to go. You're just building and trying to do something that you think is going to be useful, important, like helpful. And I think that is like probably how I ended up where I am today by accepting chance and also trying like building shit, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shane. I mean, you get through a lot of things there.
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned all the project choosing that dilemmas and dramas, because, well, as you can guys see, it's not easy. We are just now in the phase, people are just looking around, starting their research, slowly choosing their project. So it's I think it's a good example. You wanted to work on Red, but had to pivot, but it ended up being a great benefit. So that's, I think, a good lesson to like really analyze what you are working on. Guys, not overcommit to click quickly. But I think you
Yeah.
will have more about the EPF experience later. I just maybe we could just jump to the present a bit. Like we are gonna come back to the experience. I'm sure guys will have a bunch of questions about that. But what about now? What are you working on today? I'm curious. What are you up to these days? How is the lighthouse going? What sort of priorities? What some sort of cool work in your like life as a core dev now? Yeah.
Yeah, good question. So over in so I work at Sigma Prime now, which like is the one of the like more bigger maintainers of Lighthouse, and also Sigma Prime has like at least a couple other projects. One is called Anchor, and Anchor does like distributed validator technology. You can think of it as like in the consensus layer, you have validator client that's attesting to duties like attestations or making block proposals, basically signing duties. This Anchor project is basically a distributed version of like a consensus layer validator client. So I'm just thinking purely about, and that's like what I work on. I work on everything related to what's basically a validator client signing of duties. And we are making significant upgrades with related to EPBS right now because that changes, like it adds new duties like this thing called proposer preferences. Block signing is now obviously changed because the payload has been decoupled from the block. So it's pretty big effort. I mean, to answer your question, I'm basically still doing EPBS, just with a very strong focus on the validator client. Is a fun way to like look at it. And yeah, I'll like upstream PRs to Lighthouse because I use them as like a dependency, as a crate. It's like a Rust-based project as Anchor. So anyway, it's still really fun. I mean, it's probably been about a year since I went down the EPBS rabbit hole, and like we're still on it. And yeah, it's really exciting. The validator client is like pretty broad ecosystem, with folks like Lido, and like we think about also like the block builders like Titan and those types of guys, like blinded blocks, or like going away. These types of things are like what we are navigating. So yeah, I mostly focus on validator client, I guess, is in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, very well. So, like, I mean, that's incredibly important. Like, it's like Lighthouse is basically the BN and the VC, right? So, like, you are a VC now. I hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
like, but like, yeah, doing working on the very important piece there. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool. And EPBS, it's still going. I think that's like, just to like give some context. I think you're very lucky there. Like, in a sense, like, starting something in the EPF and basically still a year later now, like you are the EPBS guy in the client. I
Yeah.
think incredible trajectory, but also like yeah, it was a very lucky pivot there at the beginning of the fellowship. Awesome,
Yeah,
nice.
no, totally. And still some stuff like in like the Beacon API space. Like Beacon API is what connects the validator client to the Beacon node. So I've had a couple of the like EPBS like API modifications, and not a couple actually, literally all of them related to EPBS merge for the Beacon API. I still have a couple that are open related to like block proposing. So that's just another way you guys can get like into like core development besides just working on the clients. They have these other open source repos that kind of connect clients, let's say like a validator client, to the Beacon node. That would be the Beacon API. And then there's like the builder API specs that connects like external builder to the Beacon node. And then an execution API, right, that connects the like consensus layer to execution layer, right? So there's these other specs that you can kind of figure out a way to like niche into as well. And it's good to understand and build on them. Like for me, I realized that like EPBS was coming. I had to like work on it during the cohort, and I wanted to make some changes to the validator client. And there was no way for the validator client to talk to the Beacon node. So I was like, oh, that means I have to go modify the Beacon API. So like during the cohort, I just made this like massive PR to like add all the new endpoints and modify the existing ones. So it's just like you're not always told like what to do during your cohort, right? You just kind of figure it out as you go. And just that one like change was pretty crazy because I mean the spec I wrote for Beacon API then gets implemented by all the client teams, not just Lighthouse, but like also like Nimbus and like Lodestar and like all these guys. So that was really like one of the more like cool things. Was not told to do and figured out I needed it, and then ended up being like really cool contribution to EPBS for like all the clients, which I like best.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Shane. That's great. That's a great advice right there. I think you know really what you're talking about. So maybe like to ask one more question before I open open it to the audience. Just wondering, like, so looking back at a fellowship, like, what is some knowledge that you wish you had at the time? Some advice you give to yourself, like what you wish you knew when you were in these shoes, like starting in the first office hours a year ago, almost. Yeah. Do you have anything you look back at too, like to prepare yourself for the cohort maybe now, or like looking back, like what changed since then?
Yeah, things wish I would have known like at the beginning. I just think trying to decide your level of involvement in like your project is going to be it's pretty significant, and you're not going to like, oh, it's not going to be necessarily defined by your mentor. A lot of it will be you having to try to like figure it out as you go. You don't know when you start, like, okay, I have a mentor, like, are we going to be talking async a lot of the time, or are we going to have like weekly calls? And that honestly is just going to depend upon who your mentor ends up being and what kind of communication style that they have. And there might be like months where they have no time to like talk to you because they're working on, like, let's say the EPBS, like sorry, the new hard fork, right? Like say Glamsterdam for now. And then you'll just be at a point where you have to try to figure things out as you go. And yeah, the advice like I kind of have there is like progress beats perfection. Just like pick a path and iterate on it. Don't just like spend so much time thinking and like going down, like thinking up different designs, like pick, at least something to where you can start like building on that, at least so you have more stuff to show during the cohort. I think like earlier on, it can be, you might think like, oh, I should spend a lot of time doing like, let's say lots of research for the project. And I think earlier on, if I would have known this, it might be better to just do more PRs. And that's kind of the path I ended up going down like relatively quickly, but I could have started even sooner to just kind of like start making contributions to the project. Like in the end, I think I got like 20 or so PRs to Lighthouse. And that speaks a lot of volume because that's how you're getting like to know the team better. My favorite communication style is to talk on PRs. That's like, a PR discussion is probably the best. When I started at Lighthouse, or I guess let's say Anchor, I was on a team with like 3 or 4 guys, and I never had like a direct chat with one of the guys until a month later, like a one-on-one call. But before that, we just only talked through PR reviews, and that was beautiful. So it depends on you as a person. But other like types of tips are just like when you're at, let's say, the conferences like Mumbai, or which would be like DEF CON. Yeah, definitely go to as many events as possible that are related to like core dev related work. Go to talks and like reach out to people. I think that is a great way to like meet people in real life, and you'll see them at like future conferences, and you can keep your like foot in the door that way. I think it's useful to stay involved to some extent, like on the ETH R&D Discord. If you like think about things that you can contribute to like whatever you're working on a thread that's related to your project. If you can go to like breakout rooms related to your project. Knowing these types of things, like kind of you get a lot of alpha for one from doing these, to understand like what are spec changes, because I was working on EPBS and it was super in flight. The consensus spec is updating pretty regularly, and I could either be like very reactive, like only be checking PR changes to the consensus spec repo, or I could be involved in the conversations in the breakout room that like led up to those consensus spec PRs that would change the spec. And I liked the second one where I'm involved a little bit earlier on, and there were times where I actually was able to like make contributions to the spec itself. Like I had at least one PR to the consensus spec from like having these conversations in breakout room, and it was more likely to get merged because we talked about it in advance. I got like some pre-agreement from some of the guys. So there's a lot of alpha from kind of being involved to that level. I think like just the more you can do of that type of thing will probably help. Other advice that like I didn't really know is from like talking to other guys who have done cohort. Maybe it is not that you get onto a client team like immediately. It could be that it could be like a year later. And I've like heard this working out from like let's say guys like on Nimbus. I think one dude did EPBS for Nimbus like 2 years ago, and he just like stayed like in communication with the Nimbus guys, still did open source for him. I think he like tried to meet up with them at other conferences. And then when EPBS became the headliner, he got on as a core dev over there. So you just don't know like where the serendipity is going to lie with having done the EPF program, and like when or how things might work out. You just want to like increase your chances as much as you possibly can throughout the cohort. I think that would probably be advice I would give to myself earlier on, I guess.
It was a lot of mix of advice, man. Like many different things, actually.
Yeah,
Thank you. I think it's really great. I think you also like sort of recapped a bunch of stuff that we recommend earlier, but like with
nice.
much more specific examples. So that's really great. I appreciate that. Like, yeah, you have this view, and guys, like, please, now is your time. Like, go ahead and ask your questions. I mean, I can keep chatting with Shane. We are old buddies, we can chat all day, but like I would like you to meet him as well. So please, if you have any insights into, what is it like going through the cohort or his work right now, if you have maybe similar project going on, so whether it's technical question or anything else, feel free to raise your hand or write in the chat if you cannot use your mic. And Marco was first. Go ahead.
Hey guys. So Shane, I wanted to ask you about the PRs that you mentioned because you mentioned like making a multiple of those during the cohort. Were they like something related to the PBS or it was just like generalized contribution like
Yeah,
whatever comes up?
yeah, good question. So I think what you're asking really is like, should you be making contributions to the consensus, let's say the client team that you are interested in, potentially outside of your core project?
Yeah.
And the answer is it depends upon the size of your core project. If you pick something that's like a massive undertaking like EPBS, there's no way in hell I would have had any time to like focus on anything besides EPBS PRs. But if you pick something that like you think you could maybe do in like a couple of months, then you're going to have a lot of free time during the cohort to like, yes, just like hammer more PRs. You just go, of course, into like their issues tab. And since the team knows you, you're much more likely to like be the one who gets the GitHub issue. Because of course it's super competitive to like get to be able to do free work for these guys, which, I've done like in the certificate. I mean, I remember for ref, like I had a bot going to be able to like let me raise my hand first to be able to get like a open issue, right? But that gets like easier once you get more familiar with the team. But yeah, to answer, it really just depends upon the size of your project. If you're working on something massive, then you don't need to do like extra like PRs if you don't have the time because you're so focused. But also it depends upon your project. Like if you pick a project that's very, let's say, experimental, and it's not like an EIP, for example, that's slated to go to production anytime soon, then like you're basically working on stuff that is not going to be merged to their main code base anytime soon. In that scenario, I would probably recommend doing some like PRs on the side. So that way you're like engaging a bit more with the team and like doing some like actual, let's say, code that's going to make it into production eventually. I think that's like how I would approach it because you're just trying to gain more visibility, right? Like more devs on their team will review your stuff. But if you're working on something, again, very experimental, like let's say ZK stuff, then it may be that like no guys really get to see it too often except for like your mentor. And yeah, I think that would be my advice. Depends on this. It depends is the answer.
Thank you very much. That's pretty useful. So you also think that like building a piece of the architecture that is supposed to be used soon is like better than making some sort of a, as you said, like experimental hypothetical project that's like God knows like if it will ever enter the code base and such.
Yeah, good question. I think it depends a lot on what you're trying to get, let's say, out of the cohort, where you're at in terms of your like professional career. Because like lots, like whenever I was in the cohort, like lots of guys were, let's say, like still in college or like grad school, and I think like for them, it makes a lot of sense. So let's say work on something very experimental because they even have a lot more time before they even graduate. So they're not even necessarily looking for like a full-time job like immediately after cohort. If you're trying to let's say like land something sooner, then I think like working on something relevant is good because yeah, you get like more visibility with it. And the answer is really though, like you got to probably work on whatever you find actually interesting. Like if it came down to you see like three projects on the board and you're like very interested in one that's like pretty experimental like ream stuff, for example. Second one that would be like, okay, this is something the clients might actually implement. Between those two, like you're gonna work harder and more dedicated on the project that you're more interested in. And in the end, you'll have like mentor no matter what, and they can champion you if they think you're smart and you're doing a good job. So like you don't need like all the PRs I just mentioned to the main code base. Like as long as I can tell, like, oh, you're doing interesting work. This is useful. Like at least from like a getting data from, like maybe we go in this direction in a couple of years. I still think it's good. I wouldn't tell someone not to do that. Yeah, that also is. I think in the end, like you kind of follow interests, and it also comes down to like the code bases you're familiar with, right? Like if you're more like Go oriented, then you would pick something, let's say like Prism, and then you'd be looking through what are the projects available on Prism. And I would say, yeah, pick like whatever is maybe something that's more in your wheelhouse. Like you've done a lot of like database work and they have database project, that would be good. At the same time, maybe you're just you want to learn something new, and the cohort is a way to do that. So then you're like, oh great, I'm gonna go use this opportunity to like get really good at ZK, and then because I know on the straw map that that's going to happen within the next like year or two, so you can position yourself that way. And the experimental stuff can lead you to a job later, because if you think about it, like they are going to implement, let's say, most of the stuff that you guys are working on at some point in the future, and you'll be like spending the time during this grant program becoming a subject matter expert in that particular space. And therefore, like whenever they might need you, like in a year or two from now, to like be that guy for their team, because they'll remember you. Like I kind of gave the example of the guy who did EPBS like 2 years ago, and then they remembered him because they stayed in touch, and then they needed him then. So you don't know like how it's gonna go. That's why it's like probably the safest thing to pick whatever is more interesting to you, I guess, because yeah, you'll do better at that.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's generally our advice. Just like think that you do it for yourself and you do it for Ethereum, not like for a specific team or for like finding a job. But I think that like yeah, Ethereum should be about like all the interesting opportunities that gets you excited, right? Like what really drives you, what gets you excited is where you have the motivation, which means just like the ability to do the job, right? To think creatively in that field, right? Because that's where you feel comfortable, where you feel excited. Chris has a question.
Yeah, cool. So I was interested by your points on opening PRs, and I guess I was just curious, like early on in the cohort, you're still sort of scoping projects and trying to understand them. Like at what stage did you think was the right point to start opening like PRs? Because obviously you don't want to come in with something that's sort of like half thought out and like won't be received well. So like how did you strike that balance between like, okay, I'm going to start like opening PRs to discuss this, but it actually has to be something that's like well thought out? Like how do you sort of gauge that? I'm curious.
Yeah. So if you were to go to like the first project I was working on, which was this delayed execution thing for ref, I'd already been like trying to tackle open GitHub issues on their repo from like since during the study group, like the beginning of the study group. So I knocked out a bunch that way. And then whenever I got into a cohort, then I committed to the delayed execution project. I think like up until the let's say like ECC like presentations of the project. At that point, I think I maybe made like a local draft of a PR to like start implementing the EIP. So I just spent a lot of time doing like research, trying to understand what is delayed execution and how would I implement it in ref. But then, like at ECC, I figure out, oh, I should pivot to Lighthouse. Then I have to spend all this time trying to like learn EPBS enough to like make a first PR, make a plan, because like in your like project proposal, you're kind of saying like a bit of a timeline, like first month gonna probably do this, second month gonna probably do that. So I'm like, well, normally it makes sense to build data structures first. So I figured out like what are the new data structures in EPBS, and like what do I need to understand to like build these into Lighthouse. And I would write a post on it on HackMD. Obviously like your weekly post, but like also in that weekly post, I'm using as like basically my scratch pad of this is what I plan to make a modification in my PR. And also it would be like, or a lot of times like, this is the PR I made and this is why, to help remind myself later. So the answer I think is kind of like, as soon as you feel comfortable to start making PRs, I would totally do it. And you don't have to even make it necessarily to the like upstream repo, like let's say Prism itself. You could make the draft PRs like in your local, like your fork repo, and then like start building on that to see if it makes sense. Because you don't want to make like huge 3,000 line PRs. You're normally trying to build iteratively, which means you might want to be doing stacked PRs. So you build like some data structure, then another one on top, another one on top, another one on top. And if you feel pretty good about the direction you're going, then maybe you'll like upstream the first one, for example, if you think the client team like is in a space to where they're like willing to accept it. I mean, it might be the entire cohort where they don't accept any of the PRs, and then you just have like a bunch of draft like stacked PRs in your personal repo until they have the like bandwidth to start actually reviewing them. There's just no guarantees on their time and their energy. But I would say build sooner as long as you have like a plan you're pretty comfortable with and understand.
Okay, yeah, no, that's pretty interesting in terms of like your approach to like creating PRs, and yeah, no, that is interesting. And with ECC, were you pretty far into the cohort at that stage, or like was that like early on for you?
It was like when you guys pick your projects and you're gonna like present it to your peers. So maybe a month in, I think.
Yeah, let me just
3 weeks
context. Yeah, this is something that sort of changed. Like, sorry, you guys don't have a context on that, but last year we basically finished the phase 2 of the cohort, like this first month, by meeting at ECC some of the people, or most, about half of the cohort. But now the ECC had a different timing. Like, there is no conference in summer.
Yeah, they moved it.
Yeah. So like the situation changed a bit. Like, I mean, we did it actually just like 1 or 2 times, and before it was like this. So the idea is that after the first 4 or 5 weeks, we start doing presentations where people already have prepared their project proposals. So that's exactly this first month of research, after which you have like some real specs, some drafts, some proposal ready that you want to execute on, and that's what you present. So we will present it online, and some folks last year had a chance to present it in person as well. But like, yeah, that's exactly the sort of time when, like, by the end of the first month, having the draft, having something to start working on, and drafting also the PRs and starting to basically execute exactly around the time. So you can see basically the phases as we outline them. Like, it's something that like generally works, of course, like it's very individual. I think very many things that Shane says are true, but like also like you can be a very different case, depends on what's your project. So but yeah, it is very much right. You got it correctly. I was worried you're gonna say something like first week you just your vote, but yeah, that's great. Exactly.
No, yeah, it's time to research. Yeah, totally. Got to understand before you build. Especially it depends upon the complexity of your project as well. If it's a domain that you're very unfamiliar with, you're of course going to spend like much more time like diving deep down the rabbit hole in advance to like get more familiar with it, which was the case for me. I ended up switching to consensus layer, and then that was like, oh, a whole new world.
Yeah, fair. Cool. Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, thanks for answering my questions.
Totally.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for questions, guys. Do you have any more? Feel free to come and chat with us, with Shane. Do you have any hands to raise or any questions in the chat? Feel free to post something. I hope we still have you here. Okay, Christian. Yeah.
Hey, Shane.
Go ahead.
I want to ask, you mentioned that progress beats perfection. So I guess towards the program, you got stuck sometimes maybe. And I was wondering, how did you manage to get stuck? Through like maybe discussing to a mentor somehow, or through other like strategies?
Yeah, good question. I would say like there are multiple times where the consensus spec would change related to EPBS, and that would mean I would have to like understand like what was the change, and then how would I implement this change in Lighthouse, because it's a Python spec, and then how to build like in Rust can be like very 2 different things. And also like maybe it's like a cache value, and you might think like, oh, do I still like leave it in a cache, or do I like need to write like a completely different cache because the block and the payload have been separated now. There's many like edge cases you think through, and Sure, I guess you could try to talk to your mentor. It just depends on like how available they are. Mine in particular, honestly, like was not as available for like a good bit of the cohort, so I kind of just had to pick a direction and like roll with it. And that was kind of scary, I guess, because you're of course not sure like, oh, like am I building it now in a way that they will actually like approve later. But it unblocked me from like moving forward with my implementation because you have a project proposal, and again, it's like it has a timeline, and you're like, okay, I have like 4 phases, and if I'm in phase 2, and then there's like some change to the consensus spec because there's changes all the time, still me keep moving forward with my milestone to like get to like the 3rd and 4th stages. So that's essentially what I would do. I would still like build stuff. And like it was kind of the example I gave earlier where I had to like modify the validator client for EPBS, but there was no connection yet for like the new endpoints from the beacon node. So then it becomes like, oh, this is like a beacon API problem. So I need to go and make a PR to beacon API to like unblock myself so I can then build the endpoint based off my beacon API spec. So I can then implement in the validator client like the new functions I need to. So that was a way to unblock myself. As like in particular, I could have just waited and hoped that somebody else was gonna like implement the EPBS like beacon API spec because eventually someone has to, you know. But I just did it, and I was like, oh, I mean, I wasn't on my like project proposal plan. You know, I was like, this might be a 2-week effort to like detail 10 new endpoints to understand the spec, but it definitely seemed like a very valuable thing to do and necessary. So I'm happy I chose that direction. Those are the tough decisions. Like, do I keep going down and maybe make something hacky, or do I do the proper fix of like making the real spec itself? I think is like a pretty good example. And you can kind of get, well, let's say, I don't know, you're building a new feature onto the client, and you think of like ways it could be optimized. And then you're like, oh, do I spend the next week or 2 thinking about like this optimization to, let's say, like again, like caching some value, or do I just like kind of build the more like bare bones version so I can like keep on moving forward? I think the answer is normally like keep moving forward because the client teams in the end are going to look and like think about ways also to like make things more performant like later on. And you can propose ideas like, oh, okay, like, or you can ask your mentor at that point, but hey, should I like pivot and make this cache right now, or should I keep on like going down to like keep on building what I'm committed to? And that'll help you kind of like gauge. But they don't always answer, and then you just have to pick. And in my opinion, it's like pick the things that will like unblock you as opposed to like the fun side project. Yeah, I guess.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Chris has another question. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was just going to ask. So my understanding is you had like a project picked originally, and then you pivoted. I was just wondering, like, sort of, how you decided it was time to pivot, and like how you found that change, because that's obviously pretty difficult when you're like a good bit way through the cohort. So, yeah, I'm just curious, like, what brought you to that point where you thought you needed to pivot? Was it like sort of a natural evolution of sort of the work you'd done up until that point, and you just saw EPBS being a really good opportunity to try and lean in the direction of, or just what brought you to that decision?
Yeah, many factors, and some of it was a lot of chance and luck. Since I've been doing like the REST project for delayed execution, I mean, like I was even in like a Telegram group with like guys from REST. So I'm like, oh, I'm getting like some engagement here. A couple guys from the EF were in it as well. So I was like, oh man, what a like cool opportunity to like talk to people this way. But you could just the vibe from like the AC/DC calls and just across the board was like EPBS is going to win.
Yeah.
So I was like that's tough. But the trick is we didn't know if it was going to be the headliner for Glamsterdam. It could have been 6-second slots, for example. And then the design space for like EPBS versus delay execution would have stayed open even longer. So there's all these hedges that you're not sure about. Like if they would have gone towards 6-second slots, then maybe I would have stayed with delay execution because it was just so open. Also, Lighthouse would have deprioritized building EPBS if like 6-second slots would have won. So like they wouldn't have really cared about my work on EPBS anymore at that point anyway. So I basically figured I'm going to hedge. I'm going to build like parts of delayed execution. And then I'm also going to build, like, actually, no, I'm going to build parts of delayed execution. I'm going to study EPBS as well. And then, like, luckily, sooner than later, they made the headliner commitment to EPBS for Amsterdam. And it was early enough, I think, to where I felt comfortable enough making the pivot. If they would have made that announcement, like, even like 2 weeks later than they did, I probably would not have made the pivot because it would have felt too long. You can't like waste so much time in this very valuable opportunity you have of being in the EPF program, just like waiting for all these like external decisions to be made. It just kind of luckily worked out to where they didn't like delay the decision anymore, because they kept trying to delay the decision, like, oh, we don't know, we don't want to pick the headliner, da da da. And then one of the Lighthouse guys actually was like, okay, like when you look at all the like what people are preferring, all the client teams want EPBS. There's enough community support for it. Like, can we just decide on this ACDC call? And then in the end, they did make the decision. But it could have gone another 2 weeks, and I don't know if I could have waited that much longer. So yeah, because again, you want to be like making contributions, you want to be building stuff. But also, I didn't want to build like a completely dead project. So,
yeah.
there's value in it too, right? Like I would have learned a lot. I would maybe built like more connections with Reth guys, but I don't think they would have reviewed my work because they would already known that like EPBS was going to be the headliner. So yeah, there's that, and like I knew that if EPBS did win, then Lighthouse would care about it, and the work that I did there would be reviewed, and they would also on some level like be in communication with me to get to know me a little bit better as we are trying to like push this over something closer to a finish line over time. So yeah, it was hard, super hard decision. I've had calls with my friends about it, like, oh, what do I do? I'm like very nervous, not sure. I'm hedging. That's why I said I kind of like started doing both at the same time, which was not ideal, right? You want to be spending all your time on your grant project. And I hope none of you end up in a situation like I did, because it's not perfect, right? Like you obviously rather just like pick your project and like kind of just roll with it. That is the best case scenario. But oh well.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting just because like there's loads of interesting projects, but actually making a call on how to move forward is pretty difficult. Because as you said, like a lot of things are moving and changing all the time. So it's hard to sort of I guess anticipate and marry like what you find interesting with what's going to be relevant. So no, that's just super interesting example. So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, and check the strawmap.org. You can kind of see like what's on the horizon that is kind of be able to tell you, oh, this is like an important project. And the fact that like all the projects that are on the board are like created by the client teams, right? Like if it says Grandine, it's like Grandine wants this, right? If it says Prism, it's like Prism wants this. So there is value in these projects. The delayed execution one was like, I like pre-negotiated this with the Reth guys because like I was doing so much open source with them. So we're just like talking in Telegram. But like the best case is you already know that like if the project's on the board, that like it's gonna be useful. So I mean, if you can, I would recommend just picking a project from the board. I went like off of the board, and this is what happened to me. I mean, it worked out in the end, but there was like a lot of chance involved there. Probably should just pick the project from the project list. Probably. But anyway, yeah. That's my advice, I guess. Like the project list is stuff that the client teams actually want. So it's like, dude, you're already going to be like on some level good. They care. They put it on there for a reason. Mario and like Josh, what do you guys want? This is what they want.
Yeah. That makes total sense. Cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. Please just do what excites you. Don't try to strategize too much. It's not good to strategize in Ethereum. EOF, another great example I actually did earlier during a call before. So yeah, we can follow the forecast, of course, for all the current stuff as well. Tosin has a question.
Yeah, so you've touched on the question a bit, right? But mostly, how do you manage to keep track of the simultaneous development across the whole domains, right? Both as a fellow and a core dev, right now. So as you know, even within consensus and execution, there are a lot of like domains within it, and there's a lot of like spec updates and all that. And even recently with the builder separation and all that, how do you manage to keep up with with the updates, and it's quite it's a fast-paced domain itself. So how do you manage to keep up with the updates across all of these domains itself?
Yeah, good question. And this is a problem for like a lot of the core devs, and also like people will solve it in various ways. Different client teams do it differently. For me personally, like I use kind of like the R&D EPBS channel as like a source of truth, and I basically spend all my time in there. I don't really like cast a broad net and try to check out the other E-R&D Discord channels, because then I would lose a lot of attention. For example, I'm not thinking about Hegata at all. I'm not thinking about like Ream stuff at all. I'm very much, I spend my time in the EPBS channel. So laser focused on that. When I'm looking at like consensus spec PRs, I'm filtering for, is this EPBS related or not? Like I'm very just like, this is my thing that I'm cared about. You can't, there's not enough time in the day to like try to stay on top of all the things. Like but you need enough context to understand if like, let's say another EIP is going to impact the part of Ethereum that you care about and that you're focused on. So that's where like, again, like also listening on the ACDC calls is interesting, because they talk about stuff before they even maybe become a real EIP. And you could think about like, is this going to impact EPBS in my example, but it could be anything for you. So yeah, I think just the best thing is to stay relatively narrow if you can, after you've built enough context to know what is narrow for you. I think what is it, like the T-shaped thing, where it's like you have a really narrow focus, but then you have like a good breadth of like knowledge of the other stuff. So like understand the consensus layer well enough to understand like, is it relevant to the part, if there's a change in this part of the consensus layer, is it relevant to like what I'm focused on, which for me now is the validator client. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, but I just wouldn't recommend spending like trying to know everything all at the same time, because you might get there after a few years, but I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Yeah, very well, thank you. Yeah, we had a question also in the chat specifically about like getting into Rust and the consensus layer, how to actually start contributing properly instead of just continuously diving into specs. So yeah, what is your more hands-on tips, like how to start your contributions?
Yeah, PRs. I think is like the best, simplest answer. I know it's hard, because when you are trying to like grab an issue from a client team, there's so much competition normally for getting it. And then if you do get it, that's your opportunity to like practice Rust. But you should already have like some understanding of how Rust works by like playing with it and like, let's say, reading books about it. There's a good Rust book called Rust in Action that I really like, because it's distributed systems plus Rust at the same time. And you get to learn kind of like both concepts if you haven't done much distributed systems work. And then of course there's like the Rust Lang book that's available online, but it's just like, the most typical thing. But yeah, you should understand like how Rust like kind of works so you can do it safely. And then like, while you're learning Rust, you can be doing the PRs to like any client team that is Rust based, like Grandine, Rest, Lighthouse. They have like Ethrex now, and yeah, I think that's as far as I can remember. All the Rust based guys. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, I know it's hard to like just jump in that way, but I think PRs is the best way to learn, because you're practicing it. I mean, you could build your own little projects, but yeah, I think like that is also useful. If you're like trying to learn more async stuff, learn Tokyo. Like I'd say like async runtime, Tokyo is very, very useful and important. Can't elaborate on that enough, because most things that we're dealing with on the consensus layer is like async stuff. Messages coming like across a slot, right? You gotta be able to handle them performantly. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Shane. Yeah, that's great. It's a hard language to master, so I respect, man. Yeah, awesome. Jeff has a question. Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question, like it's more about personally. I'm curious, like which part of this job brings you joy, or what excites you doing your job?
Yeah, so I'm a very mission-driven type of person. The thing that drives me is like basically democratizing access to finance globally. I want anyone to be able to like access financial instruments. I think Ethereum is probably the best place for that to happen. So I'm happy that I got into the Ethereum space. I think it's the chain that has the best chance at it. And specifically within the like validator client work, it's a cool distributed system. I like doing Rust. I like that I get to like be thinking about the latest and greatest in Ethereum. How are like new hard forks going to impact me? There's like always some challenge. I think that like I don't know, people at Sigma Prime are all smart and interesting people, so it's cool to hang out with them. And yeah, I have the EPF cohort to thank for this opportunity.
Yeah, glad we got you the gig, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. Like, I mean, you put it one way about like financial access, right? But like, there are many, I think, many use cases to Ethereum, and for everyone, the reason can be different. But all, no matter what that specific is, like, it's always about the mission, right? Like about being able to deliver this like large scale project can empower in all kinds of ways people. Like that's like what keeps me going as well, just like seeing the opportunity and the impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like the space is very volatile. Like people come and go, and especially money comes and go in this environment. So like the core devs are here to stay. The core devs are here for the long term mission and for the vision of the technology. And also that's just because we are nerds and just like love the technology, play around with stuff, and like figure out problems and solve them, right? And there is a lot of problems to solve, a lot of interesting ones.
Yeah.
So that's what we are here for. Yeah. And I'm just doing the renting, so somebody can come up with a question. Guys, please raise your hands, and so I don't have to fill the time in here.
Yeah, if you guys can solve quantum, that's probably a good project.
Okay, let's go with Marco now, and then we can.
Yeah, this one is like not specifically related to what Shane did, but it's like, should we include the external work that we do inside of the weekly updates, or no? Is that like a recommended thing to do if we, of course, can do it like without damaging the main project that we're doing?
I mean, like if you're working on something related, something Ethereum related, or just like generally like growing in some areas, like feel free to add like what you're working on. It's really up to you to what you want to show the world, what sort of like progress you're making, what's your process, right? So it's really I guess generally like how much relevant it is, but also like how you can make it relevant, how you sell it, how you incorporate it in your process. Like, that's the most important thing. But I mean, I understand many people here have other jobs or studies and so on, so like it's not always a fit. But feel free to like write anything that you find relevant, that you believe that like the people reading the updates should be aware of. And maybe like to reframe the question like towards the Shane a bit more, like what do you think like this benefit of the update is? Like now all these people that studied your updates, they saw all that you did in the cohort, it's all out
nice.
there. I sent them to study your history. Maybe, I mean, I hope some of them did it. But like, yeah, so what do you take from that? Like, or like what do you recommend? You had great updates, so like what do you recommend, like, this communication and updates and just like, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It helped me probably the most to stay kind of in line with whatever my project the timeline was going to be. I kind of knew I had like, let's say 4 months, and I want to be able to like hit certain milestones along the way. The HackMD posts were a way for me to kind of like judge like, oh, how far along am I, and prove to myself that I understood the idea that I was trying to build. So a good example, if I'm working on something like peer-to-peer like related, I would like spend time like looking at the consensus spec and then trying to write down on HackMD like what is the problem this is really trying to solve. Consensus spec will a lot of times describe like how to make a change, but doesn't explain the why. So I would spend a lot of time deep diving and writing into my HackMD the why. Let's say they're making a fork choice related change. What a scenario is this like trying to resolve? And I think, and then I would use that to help impact the solution that I actually would implement. because it's never just like read consensus spec and then go and implement like in Lighthouse. You got to take a lot into account. Like, what is the real problem they're trying to solve? What kind of like edge cases could be introduced? Because consensus spec is like happy path-ish, and also like edge cases, but like you can think of more, right? So you think about how you can design that out when you're making the PRs. So, and also I use it as a way to like show like the PRs that I have done. Like at least to myself, I would find myself going and looking back at my HackMD post like later on to try to like remember some concept. And I think that was like particularly helpful. So I don't have to like go and like try to find it from other like resources online. I've already like talked about it to myself and had a good like solution that way. So yeah, I found a lot of value. I think I did like every week, and would not change that aspect about the program. Yeah.
Oh, it is great to hear. I mean, that's a great advice to how to handle this process, how it can benefit you guys. That's very good. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, folks, we have last couple of minutes. Anyone wants to ask some last question, maybe, or anyone has any thoughts? Oh, here we have a question in the chat. I think Tamjid is also from Cosmos and asked like, what's the difference between the ecosystems working in one ecosystem or another? Or maybe I would like also broaden it. Like, I'm not sure if you had like some or other jobs, corporate jobs or so before. Like, how do you find this line of work special, or like where do you see the difference between the different communities or different like kinds of ecosystems, and I guess like fully open source work versus if you have something more regular. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess to continue broad. Before blockchain, I was in traditional finance as a developer, and that's where the core mission of like, oh, I see all these financial instruments that are like that you can get in the U.S., like 401ks and all this stuff, and I realized like they don't exist like anywhere else, or at least in like lots of not other places. And then when like I find crypto and I realize like, oh, they built all these like interesting like financial instruments that are like free to use by everyone. This is like really how things should be. So I then just started doing a bunch of open source. Like I picked Cosmos because I found a blockchain that was like a very finance focused one, and they were called Injective, and they're still alive, doing well. And so yeah, I did open source for them. I got onto their team, similar to how it worked out like here with Ethereum. And there it's a smaller team. Like a blockchain in Cosmos is more like an app chain. So we're like maybe a 40, 50 people team. We're like the whole blockchain, and we even built like our own apps as well. Whereas Ethereum is like so many client teams written in so many different languages, communicating on these like AC/DC calls in a very decentralized like communication style. And they have like the Ethereum Foundation kind of as like guides, but also in the end, like the client teams are implementing per like a spec that they've all agreed upon. Whereas in Cosmos, it's a smaller thing. Maybe 40. It could be 5 people running a chain there, right? And you look at Ethereum, and there's like thousands. So it's just a whole like different approach to something we call blockchain, I guess, is like a good answer. And yeah, happy to be over here. Yeah, Cosmos is fun, but yeah, I mean, it's a different way to play, I guess. And I like the generalized aspect of it, kind of as Mario alluded to. Sure, like I know I mentioned finance is great and all that stuff, but like it should, in my opinion, be more general purpose, like credible neutrality. The chain could have like less preference towards what is built on top, because that's more empowering to the builders themselves. Like you kind of just want like Ethereum as an operating system, as opposed to like a very like fine-tuned instrument to be used for financial gadgets. So I kind of like pivot my mindset to more general purpose is kind of like a way that is what I would like to be building towards. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Shane. That was great. I think it was a great vision to maybe like wrap up with. Unless we have any last minute questions, we have 1 minute to go. I give you guys 5 seconds to come up with something now. We've been here. It was great. Yeah, Shane, I think we covered really everything. Like, you really, I think you are very experienced fellow. You give very strong advice, so I really appreciate that. And I think we covered really, like, I had some things in mind that I wanted to cover, make sure that the fellows learn from you. But I think you just talk and cover everything from like, choosing the project and the updates and working with mentors. I think it's been really great. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Um,
totally.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So
And
yeah,
it's been
thanks.
awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me. And like, Mario, it's always good to see you. I hope to catch you and Josh hopefully at DEF CON, and all you guys. I'll come. I'm sure to watch your like, final presentations. Really excited for that over in Mumbai. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here and hope everything goes well for you. Best of luck to all of you.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. I think you already got people hyped about Mumbai when talking about that and like
Yeah.
meeting people at DEF CON. So like it's it's still a lot of work before we get there. But like I think we have a great kickoff here. So thank you so much for helping us with that, Shane. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And
Of course.
yeah, it's early. Hope you have a great day today.
Yep. Y'all too enjoy your days regardless. Cheers.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
y'all.
Awesome. And yeah, see you somewhere next time.
Yep, of
Have a
course.
great one, everyone. Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
We'll see you next week